Hello and welcome to Tea Time with me, Dr. Casey. I'm here today with my friend and colleague, Dr. Lindsey Wells. Dr. Wells is an amazing naturopathic physician. I'm going to give her a proper introduction in a moment, but today we're going to talk about hibiscus tea. And then we're going to talk with Dr. Wells, and she's going to share some supportive thoughts and insights on working with kids around behavioral health and just other general thoughts. She's brilliant. So let's get started talking about tea. Okay, so hibiscus tea. So the hibiscus plant, if you're not familiar with it, and Dr. Wells, do you like hibiscus tea? I should ask you.
Oh yes, it's delicious. I love the flavor of it.
Yeah, it's so great. And I love thinking about the flower. So the hibiscus plant it has those bright pink flowers. They're really like deep and luscious kind of. It's a beautiful plant. It's grown a lot in more tropical, warmer areas, but we can grow it here in the summertime also. So hibiscus is really wonderful for the cardiovascular function. It can be very supportive for reducing high blood pressure, actually. And I do want to note that none of this is medical advice. If you do plan on using hibiscus, you should talk with your doctor about it, because in some cases you may actually need to adjust your medication if you have a lot of hibiscus. But hibiscus can really help to lower high blood pressure. It works both as a diuretic, and it can also act as an ACE inhibitor, which if you've heard of that type of medication, it's kind of a similar effect, much less potent, but still has that effect. It can also be tonifying for your veins, which is nice, especially for like varicose veins or that type of thing. And then we know cardiovascular health is very related to kidney health. So hibiscus is also really supportive for the kidneys. It can actually help to improve some of the markers we look at in your blood work, including things like BUN or your blood urea nitrogen levels, as well as creatinine. It helps to kind of give your nephrons in your kidneys, it gives them some extra support. So it's a really nice kind of tonic for your cardiovascular and kidney function. So very, very nice for that. It can also be helpful if someone's experiencing a lot of UTIs, not as a treatment, but it's just kind of a general support for that system. It can also potentially lower cholesterol in conjunction with other things. It can support that. I shouldn't say it can outright lower it. In conjunction with other things, it can be supportive. And then it's also got, you may have guessed it, antioxidants with that bright, like rich color. Yeah, it's got lots of antioxidants. So it's a really nice tea. The tea itself looks kind of brownish with like a tinge of red. I don't know, you can't see in here, but I have my dog mug for Dr. Wells.
I love it.
Do you have anything you'd like to add about hibiscus tea?
I think you covered it. I also just like to add it as like a flavoring for other teas as well. So like if there is a tea that doesn't have as pleasant of a flavor, I think adding some hibiscus to it can kind of lighten up the flavor and make it more palatable for people. So you get the added benefits while still having maybe like another tea that's not, doesn't taste as nice.
Definitely. And that's a good point too on the teas and combining the teas. A lot of the times when I recommend hibiscus tea for people, it's hard to find hibiscus itself unless you go to a specialty shop. So people will find it typically with rose hips or another kind of like florally type of herb or plant in it. And that's fine. You know, it's a gentle therapeutic support, really. Yeah. So cheers to hibiscus tea.
Cheers.
Yeah. All right. So now let's talk with Dr. Wells a little bit more, and I want to give her a proper introduction because she's done a lot. So Dr. Wells is a naturopathic physician, like I mentioned. She practices in Wilton, Connecticut at the New England Center for Health. She works integratively with a focus on PANS and PANDAS, Autism Spectrum Disorder, Lyme disease, and co-infections, and other neurodevelopmental disorders, as well as other concerns. And she's also, I learned this, I didn't know this, you're a fellow with the Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs, which is awesome. And you've lectured throughout the country to both parent groups and professionals. And then, of course, she's often joined by Dr. Ed,
Yes.
your wonderful, gentle canine soul. And he provides emotional support to everyone he encounters. So, yeah, Dr. Wells, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'm going to share your info below in case anyone wants to look you up. So to start with, kind of what are maybe some just kind of general tips or ways that you might approach looking at how to support a child who has some behavioral concerns or extra needs potentially?
Yeah. So one thing to note is it's been a very difficult year, right? For adults, but for also our kids. So I think seeing behavioral issues have kind of been magnified this year. So there's a few things that I feel like can be pretty helpful. One thing that I really like to emphasize to all my families is that the parents need to make sure that they're taking care of themselves too, because our kids definitely feed off of our energy or whatnot. So, just being gentle with yourself as a parent during this time, like it's not easy whatsoever. And so, if you're in a better space, usually that will then translate to the child as well. So,
Mm,
that is just something I like to put out there to start with.
such a
Um,
good point.
yeah, so a few other like basic things that you can consider for behavioral health. Again, because it's been a challenging year and there's a lot of virtual things going on, and parents need to work and also take care of the children at home, we're relying on screens a lot, so electronics. And it has been shown that that can be detrimental to the neurological health in regards to it just altering some of the neurochemistry, especially causing issues with cortisol levels. So cortisol is our main stress hormone, right? So our body produces cortisol to help with managing stress. Now, whether that's, stress that we perceive like social stress or physiological stress. And with electronics, it can increase or dysregulate that system. So again, it can be inevitable that children have to be on screens, like because they need to for school, or it's a way to socialize with their friends. So just like a few quick tips that I found they're small, but they can be helpful, is definitely turning off the blue light on all electronics if possible. So like on iPhones or iPads, you can do that by doing the night shift mode.
Mhm.
I also find that like on laptops, like getting a blue light blocking shield can be helpful. I actually have one right here that I put on my computer.
Nice.
Um, so that can be helpful. The blue light blocking glasses, if your child's into that. So there are a few things, and trying to turn off electronics, ideally at least an hour before bed.
Hmm.
That can be significant.
And
And
just to
then,
be clear, the electronics includes like TV and also like the phones and like all devices pretty much, right?
yes, all electrical devices. And if you really want to go, be helpful, turn off the Wi-Fi at night,
Mhm.
that can really make a difference as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's your computers, it's anything with a screen, I should say. That's what you should try to avoid. Um, I also find like the basics, so just making sure that your child's getting adequate sleep, that they're having a cleaner diet, so one that doesn't have as much processed or packaged food can be helpful. And then also making sure they're detoxing appropriately. So like I have three basics for detox. It's peeing, pooping, and exercise, right? So
I
making
like
sure
it.
pooping at least once a day, because they can get super agitated if they're not. Especially, we see this pretty commonly with children on the spectrum, that there can be an increase in kind of aggressive behaviors or self-injurious behaviors or stimming if they're constipated. So really making sure that there's a sufficient stool every single day. And
Mm,
you can do that by making sure you have adequate water intake, adequate fiber intake, and then of course urinating. That would come with making sure you're drinking enough, but exercising. I think exercise is the most underutilized like treatment or intervention for all illnesses across the board.
mm,
But our kids need to get outside and they need to exercise. And now that the weather is nicer, they should be able to do that. But that can also make a significant difference in behavior right now. So those are a few tips. I hope, they were helpful.
Yeah, and just on the exercise piece, with the pandemic and a lot of kids not being at school and not having that activity at school, including like the gym and the recess and all of that.
Right.
And then also with parent schedules and, just getting outside to get exercise, I think has been challenging this
Right.
year, in particular. Are there potentially any like indoor type exercises that you might recommend for kids if they have that kind of situational constraint in getting out and getting more activity?
Yeah, so it depends on how big the child is, but I really like those indoor trampolines, actually, those little ones, to get kids to jump on those. I find that doing some sort of like, how do I say this? Like a little challenge with the family, that it becomes like a family thing and there's like a motivation for it or like a little bribe at the end, like to, do whatever the challenge is. So like, however many sit-ups or who can do the plank for the longest or, push-ups or something like that. Or the bigger thing is, using that screen time that our kids want so desperately as a bribe to doing some exercise. So whether that's, taking the dog for a walk of some sort or, doing, like I said, where there's 5 minutes of some sort of physical activity or doing some laps around the house or going up and down the staircase, those types of things, with intention, like movement with intention can be helpful. But yeah, you can get creative around the house. But I like those indoor trampolines. I find them to be, they don't take up too much space. And also you can really work up a sweat and get your heart rate up for the kids.
I hadn't thought of that. That's awesome. Thank you for mentioning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then one more question for you.
Sure.
Are there any just kind of in general, like, and this can be really quick, but just in general, like fairly safe supplements that parents could look into if their kids are feeling like maybe extra stimulated and need to kind of calm down a little bit? Is
Yeah.
there anything that, yeah.
Sure. So I really love ashwagandha, which is again an adaptogen to help regulate cortisol levels, and I find that to be very safe in children. Um, I also think it's I call it a mom herb in the sense that, like, it's pretty stressful to have maybe a child with some extra needs, or again, just in general, being expected to like wear so many hats. So I find ashwagandha to be very calming and safe for children. So that would be one. And then the second one I would say is also magnesium. So magnesium, again, can be very calming to the nervous system. It can help with behaviors as well. You just have to kind of find the right form that works well for your child. So like if your child has some behavioral issues on top of being constipated, like they're not eliminating every day, then maybe magnesium citrate would be the right one for them. Or if, they have behavioral issues and maybe some hyperactivity, maybe magnesium glycinate is the right form for them. So you might have to play around a little bit with the right forms of magnesium, but I find that magnesium and ashwagandha tend to be my two go-tos a little bit, just to try. There's some other ones like L-theanine as well, which I also find to be very safe. And there's been some research to support that as well, to help with anxiety and to help with behavioral issues and aggression. So that would be something to consider as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to share at this point? I think you've given some wonderful thoughts and insights.
Not so much. Again, just a reminder to be gentle with yourself. It's been a challenging year and challenging for our kids, but our kids do love structure. Our kids thrive off of structure. So, making sure that although it's challenging, that there's still some sort of structure for your child. And that in of itself could be very helpful for behavioral issues as well. So all these different things to consider, but just know all parents are doing their best. So keep it up.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wells, for taking the time to chat and join me for tea time. Cheers
Yes.
to you and to
Cheers.
all our little kiddos during this time, especially.
Yes.
All right.